This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, and we take a look at the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the last day of the month, the 30th of September, 2020, and I am DM.
I'm JM.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, why Uhuru refused to open schools. In the Standard, Ruto goes wild. And in the Star, Yatani stops public service recruitment.
Yes.
Let us begin with the Standard. Who went wild? Why? Or rather, why?
So the Standard is telling us that Ruto went wild, and they're basing this on they're calling it the Hustlers Parade that he had at his official residence in Karen.
There's a video that's been circulating.
Yeah.
Absolutely, which features a wheelbarrow heavily. So the DP, the Standard says that the DP was uncharacteristically gung-ho. Once again, it's gloves off, as we've been told he's been doing for the past few months, where he really harped on the hustler narrative and said, and I quote, "We will continue what we are doing, what to do meaning what will they do?" And he said, "I am DP now, but I rose from selling chicken. I'm telling everybody in the Republic of Kenya, we are going to have a different conversation devoid of ethnicity and who has power. We have the wrong conversation for 50 years, resulting in half the population being below the poverty line." So what the DP was doing, as I was saying, is perpetuating the hustler narrative and saying that there are some people who are below the poverty line, and he is, giving them instruments of business, wheelbarrows, washing machines, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, how rudimentary.
How rudimentary. I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
Presidents or people who want to run for president, of course, must have a kind of philosophy.
Yeah, their call to action.
Their call to action. In 2017, Raila had the "I am Moses, I'm going to take you to the promised land." But that was very amorphous, and it was based on him himself and what he is, and not on the people. So I will say that the Ruto strategy is very brilliant for three reasons. Number one, it's a distraction.
Yeah.
And the thing that Ruto is distracting us from is the ethnic conversation. Now, Kenya is a country of 40 plus tribes. And since independence, we've had a circulation of a grand total of 2 out of the 40
The
plus.
Kikuyu and the Kalenjins.
Kikuyus and the Kalenjins.
Yeah.
Now, if Ruto did not create an alternative narrative to distract from that fact of the circulation of the Kalenjins and the Kikuyus, then he would be in for a rough ride, because people would say, why?
It disqualifies himself.
It disqualifies him on a personal level on account of his ethnicity. So it serves very perfectly as a distraction, because he's literally telling us, look away from this ethnic conversation. The other thing is that it's an illusion. It's an illusion, of course, we have said this many times before. This is somebody who is calling other people to be hustlers with him, when he is not a hustler. He is amongst the Kenyans who live the most opulent and wealthy lives. But then thirdly, I think you alluded to that, GK, this thing is also about subjugation, because the solution that he is offering these hustlers to lift themselves up from poverty is really the lowest rudimentary level of labor. And I'm going to predict that his party sign, the party that he is going to form, the symbol is going to be a wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow that was invented in 231 AD in the Chang dynasty. We have since had the Industrial Revolution. We are now in the age of artificial intelligence. But he's calling people to do this rudimentary labor that is not aspirational, but it is still smart. You know why? It serves the purpose of perpetuating the hustler dynasty narrative. If this guy is going to be the next Moi and rule for 30 years, then for the narrative to still be tenable, then people have to remain in that level where they're doing manual labor.
There couldn't be a better breakdown, a better dismantling of William Ruto than that one that you've given, Dia. That one is one for the ages.
And I think Kenyans, tribe is not a bad thing. and he's trying to shift us to that place where being Kikuyu or being Kalenjin or being Kamba is going to work against you. That's not it at all. Ethnic arithmetic will be a part of elections for years to come.
That's right.
So okay, so we have that. We have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headline. We'll ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
This is a headline for the win.
Oh yeah, it's groundbreaking because he's gone wild in the head. And you know what? The truth is hard, but propaganda is cheap. And I think that's what we have to be wary of. The gimmicks that we're about to see in the next 2 years are going to be world
we've
class.
Never seen before.
Exactly. So let's park that. I think that was a contender. Daily Nation, why Uhuru refused to open schools. So the president gave a speech in which many schools administrators had thought that schools were going to open by October, according to what CS Magoha had told them. And then there was a quick reversal on this by the president. And the reason for this was that the logistical gaps were raising the risk of failure, so that schools have not prepared sufficiently to open. And so the roadmap is still for January 2021 to give schools time to prepare themselves, have the water, have everything that is needed, the thermometer guns, the masks, everything else. But also interestingly, they considered the psychological state of mind of the children, that you can't just crash into starting school, give them time so that they can be more productive when they finally do go. So yeah, Magoha has been told go back to the drawing board. It's a very boring headline.
But it is useful because that is something that is on top of the minds of many parents in the country.
I'll toss it. Let's move to the Star.
The Star, also what seems to be a boring headline, but actually fairly interesting. Public service recruitment, which Yatani has put a stop to. And so he's frozen the hiring of new civil servants for 3 years across ministries, departments and agencies. And to contain the wage bill, that's the reason why. And so only the most essential jobs will be budgeted for and advertised. And this is the context here is a progressively aging civil service. We're told that 35% of national government employees, for example, are aged between 51 to 60 years. And so the other side of the coin is that we still have to continue hiring public servants if we are to make sure that there's no gap or crisis in terms of leadership and management in the civil service. I think it's a necessary directive. I think we must aim to downsize the civil service. I think this is a good time to really rationalize and reflect on the kind of civil service we want and how many we want working for us. And so I'll just give a few statistics. Relative to other countries, we're not doing too badly. According to KNBS data from 2017, we've got about 740,000 Kenyans being paid from public funds. And so in Kenya, 1 out of every 64 people work for government or for the state. In Malaysia, it's worse, 1 in 20 people. In Indonesia, it's 1 out of every 50 people. And the ideal appears to be that is the case is in China and the UK, where it's 1 out of every 100 persons working in the civil service. And so I think ultimately this is a good time. It couldn't be a better time to stop, to put a freeze and to think about what the future should look like.
Should be fantastic. I like the commentary. Thank you for lifting our veil of ignorance with those statistics. However, I still think that the Standard was a better headline.
I agree.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I agree.
So there you have it. Standard gives us our winning headline. Let's move to our political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Let's go to the one I found most humorous, which was the Star.
Yes. So in the Star, we have here a cynical rendition from Ozone. And we've got the cartoon depicting our state of normalcy, as he calls it. Uhuru is boarding a plane with a suitcase and a begging bowl, perhaps signaling his recent or his current visit to 3-day visit to France. And then you've got Ruto there pushing a wheelbarrow with a ballot box in it, referencing his hustlers parade that we talked about, DM. And here, you know, if we flip this, then perhaps I could give it a contender for winning cartoon. this is a story of Bruno and Pablo here playing out. And we talked about this in the episode of 20th September 2020, in which we did a Fifth Estate release. Bruno, if you recall in that story, is the pipe builder. And then Pablo is the pipe builder and Bruno is the wheelbarrow carrier.
Bucket carrier.
Yeah, precisely, the bucket carrier. And Uhuru Kenyatta with his begging bowl, he's going out there to get more money to build the pipes that will eventually get us water from up in the valley to where we live. Compared to Ruto, who still wants to, in his wheelbarrow, carry jerrycans of water. That's his level of
wasting
thinking.
a lot of energy and
Absolutely.
This is the subjugation context that I was talking about, that you have to keep it at a very rudimentary level, or the most rudimentary level of industry, in order to maintain societal stratification. Otherwise, if everything becomes so sophisticated, then you no longer have the premise to have a hustler narrative.
Interesting. Parking, guys, I want to describe the Daily Nation. I do not want to describe the Standard because I think it was very boring and you should toss it on account of that. So very quickly, we have a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta, and he's got on some plastic around his hands as he's signing a loan. So you have caricatures of all the sort of world leaders. You have Xi Jinping, you have Putin, you have Boris Johnson, you have Trump, and our latest one is Emmanuel Macron. Pessimistic cartoon about the loan. And I think here again, we will start to see sort of what is good for this country perhaps much later on.
Yes.
I think this man has a vision that some people just haven't seen quite yet. Who do we give our winning cartoon?
I think we give it to...
We're not even looking at the Standard.
We give it to the Star. We give it to the Star.
We're giving the Star our winning cartoon, and we're asking for Ozone to sort of flip his narrative.
Flip the narrative.
There you have it. And now for our final thought, but before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
So today we are reading, I suppose, one of the most read books in the world, that is the Bible. And we're looking at the book of Exodus in particular.
Yes.
So Exodus is the second book of the Old Testament. It's also the second book of the Pentateuch, which is the 5 books of Moses. It's arguably one of the most important books in the Bible or in the Old Testament, because this is where we find the stories of the first Passover, for instance, and also where we get the 10 Commandments. So the book of Exodus, in our view, is a book about redemption. And it's a book about deliverance, but it's also a book about leadership. And that is what we're talking about this week. We're looking at different leaders and their experiences and the lessons that we can glean from them. So let me give a quick background of the book of Exodus for those that may not be familiar with it. But I must say that this book of Exodus is not a story, it's an epic. It spans generations, it spans centuries before, and then and so it is quite impossible to cover everything. So I'll just give the salient points. So the book begins with oppression, but first we are introduced to how the Israelites came into Egypt. And so we're taken back 400 years in the days of Jacob and his 12 sons. The first son, of course, to go into Egypt was Joseph, who was sold off by his brothers, and he then rose into and was living in the palace in Egypt, and then his family followed thereafter. In the Bible, the book of Exodus begins by telling us that Jacob's descendants in Egypt at the time when they came were 70 in number. However, the Israelites reproduced exponentially. 400 years later, and there was a new pharaoh at that time who had forgotten about Joseph, who had forgotten about the contributions that he had made to Egypt, and actually at one time he saved them from famine. So this pharaoh had forgotten all that, but what he was seeing at that point was how numerous the Hebrews were becoming, or the Israelites. They were growing in number, and he was also feeling threatened that they were going to grow in influence. They were going to become the fifth column, which, as you know in history, is those people who come into a country, they grow in number, and then eventually when the country is attacked, they join the enemy. So, for this reason, he forced the Israelites into slavery. But in addition to that, and you will realize that I'm skipping and fast forwarding, in addition to that, he also ordered a genocide. He ordered a genocide of the firstborn sons of every Israelite family. Every infant that was born and that was a boy, he ordered the midwives to kill them. This didn't happen, so he ordered his soldiers to kill them. But there was one infant who was saved by his mother, and that infant was Moses. There's a whole story there which you will find in the book of Exodus. Fast forward, and this is the guy, this infant who was saved from the genocide of Hebrews. This is the guy who became the deliverer and the savior of the Israelites, and he led them to what God had promised them, the promised land, to Canaan. So the story of Moses and his leadership, or at least the particular part that we are looking for, spanned this leadership that he conducted spanned 40 years. There were 40 years in the wilderness. And the story of leadership that we are gleaning from Moses was quite extraordinary. And I'm just going to point out two reasons why it was extraordinary, or two circumstances. One, he was leading many people, but these people were not stationary. They were in motion. He was leading a population in transit. Historians have estimated that the Israelites that left Egypt were between 2 million and 3 million people. So it's not like normal circumstances where a leader will lead people and establish a capital, establish institutions and systems and rules, and puts police stations near every small population. This was different. They had to pitch their camps, pitch their tents, and move. So Moses had a lot to think about in terms of logistics, in terms of provision, in terms of arbitration rather. Then the second thing is that Moses was leading in the face of oppression. And this oppression that he faced, much like many other leaders, was from the inside and from the outside. His own family doubted that God himself was had spoken to Moses, and that what he was doing was on behalf of God. But God said in Numbers 12:8, I speak with Moses face to face, even plainly, and not in the dark sayings, and he sees the form of God. And for those who have read the book of Exodus, you know that he is the only one who had face-to-face conversations with God and asked God who he was, and God gave him a rather vague explanation, but he was in conversation with God. So there were those who were doubting Moses' rule, and I think back in 2017, when our own Raila was Moses, there were perhaps those who wondered the same thing. If
will we get there?
Will we get there, and if he was truly ordained? But I suppose the difference between Raila and Moses is that Moses had the difficult task of guiding a people who were in motion.
I want to give two numerous lessons from the book of Exodus. And the first one is on the principle of regimentation and division of labor. So in Exodus 18, we read that when Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, visited him, he witnessed the inefficiencies with which Moses was adjudicating the disputes of the Israelites. So Moses, it turns out, would take his seat every day from morning to evening judging. And so
spent all his time.
Absolutely. So Jethro advised him to, instead of doing that, select capable men, and I'm quoting here, select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, 50s and 10s. So, have them serve as judges for the people at all times. But have them as well bring every difficult case to you, the principle of escalation there. The simple cases, they decided then amongst themselves, and Jethro was saying that to Moses, that will make your load lighter because they'll share it with you. And so we see there that delegation, efficiency, and a system of regimentation, such as that one of the military, is one of the fundamental principles of proper management.
Leadership,
Now the second is a spiritual lesson for all the believers of Elohim out there. Elohim, the Almighty, could have taken the children of Israel to Canaan in 40 days, but he chose 40 years. Why did he do so? The book of Psalms 95:10 tells us that for 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they have not known my ways. And so Elohim could not begin a new chapter in Canaan with the stubbornness of mind of the Israelites. The Israelites who had just left, I think, about a millennium, half a millennium rather, of slavery, could not manage circumstances in freedom. And if that stubborn generation crossed over to Canaan, Israel as a state would have been dead on arrival. They wouldn't have managed to fight off Jericho and all the other enemies that they found in that land. And so Elohim put them in a classroom called the Sinai Desert for 40 years, renewing their minds, training them mentally to be able to handle responsibility, to live in freedom. And personally, Elohim is more concerned about your mental transitions as an individual, not so much your physical transitions, but your mental ones. And so he will periodically lead you into tests to prepare you, to strengthen you for battle in the future. This 40 years was a critical time for Israel. It was the process of the making of a nation. And I'll end it there. I'll end it there.
Wow. So I really liked this story of Moses because he wasn't your ideal leader. He was shy, not well spoken, and he really wondered why he had been picked for this task. So there's an old saying that says Moses was somebody for 40 years and then a nobody for 40 years, and then learned what God could do with a nobody for 40 years, right? And the book of Exodus really got me thinking of what Moses really went through. So you went from living as royalty when you're picked up in the river and you know you're raised as a prince
from the Nile to the palace.
Exactly. You go from living from a palace to go to the pasture. You go from high society to dealing with sheep. And I really wondered what Moses went through dealing with such a drastic change. So when God has asked you to accept a great change in your life situation or status for reasons beyond your understanding, how do you go about this and be a leader while doing so? And it was common for leaders in the Bible to be brought from like obscurity, which is what Moses was brought from. He was just, not as of great stature, but God decided to use him anyway. So there's a saying that goes, so that what to whom much is given, much is expected. But then also for Moses, it was the opposite is also true. That to whom much was required, much was also given. And I think this is really important for us as we close out Moses and leadership lessons, because the 10 Commandments he was given really are a series of values that could unite a people. Moses himself never really made it to the promised land. But I think the important there is that God still declared him as faithful. The other thing to remember is that Moses always interceded in prayer for these people, even when they complained, because 40 years is a long time to be in the wilderness, even when they complained. And as a leader, you always deal with difficult people, and no one ever really tells you to pray for them. And I think that's what Moses can teach us.
It's true.
That can be value-based leadership, that you can pray for those who are stubborn and disobedient, and hopefully God will intercede on your behalf.
On their behalf. I was telling you guys earlier on that when he faced opposition from within, his own family, Aaron and Miriam doubted that God spoke with him, and they were telling him that. And God was so angry with Miriam and that he struck her with leprosy. And what did Moses do? Pray. Not only did he forgive her, he prayed for her recovery and for the Lord to not make her perish.
And so Moses, what he did for the people of Israel, the Israelites, is that he had the biggest sort of organization turnaround in history, right? You go from having this mentality of slavery to knowing that you have a promised land, to knowing that you are worthy, and all sorts of things.
I love that.
So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Standard and a winning cartoon from the Star, I want to leave you with this. God called on Moses to an enormous leadership role. Jesus said, from everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. That's from Luke 12:48. And when we look at Moses' life, it seems clear that the opposite was also true. To those of whom much is required, much was given. Moses' friendship with God sustained and empowered him for the work that he was to do. And ask yourself, where is God calling you to lead? What kind of a difference will friendship with God make in your role as a leader? So please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. But find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Peter, and